We have now cut the tenons on our short rails, and now it's time to fit them to the mortises that we cut earlier on our legs. It's really important at this point in time to keep track of everything, because we're going to mark these and fit them to fit in one specific orientation on our table. So I'm going to show you one setup, and then you can repeat the process on the others. So I've got two legs. These two legs are going to end up being opposite each other, and they're going to be joined by an upper rail and a lower rail here. What I want to do now is fit this tenon to this mortise, and fit this tenon to this mortise, and label the location of this particular rail for work that we're going to do to it later on. I'm going to do the exact same process with the other three rails here, fitting them each specifically to a specific mortise. The top rail, the top short rail is a little bit different. If you look at the mortise, you'll notice the mortise is rounded at the bottom. The end of the tenon is square. So we need to make this square tenon match that rounded mortise. So we're going to need to use a chisel here to go ahead and clean that up, and we'll make that fit nicely, and then we're going to label it, and we'll move on to the next one and the next one until we have all four rails fitting nicely into the assembled end frame. So what I'm going to do is, if I know that I want this mortise and this tenon to go together, I'm going to make sure I only work on these. So I'm going to mark this tenon with the number 1. And I'm going to mark this mortise on the inside, where I won't be able to see it when it's put together, with a number 1. Over here, this is going to become a number 2. And I'm going to mark on the inside here number 2. I know it doesn't look like a number 2, but that is a number 2 for me, especially when you're trying to draw in such a small spot. But now I know that this mortise and this mortise and tenon go together, as do these two over here. Now if I know this is the orientation that this is going to end up being in, I'm going to mark the inside face of my rail, and I'm going to mark the bottom edge of my upper rail. If I were doing my lower rail, I would still mark the inside face, but I would mark the top edge of my rail. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and shape that tenon to fit this mortise so that these two fit nicely together. So to do that, we're going to put the rail in a vise. I should put that a little bit lower here. And what I want to do basically is just clip the corners off of the bottom edge of this rail. Now I know it's the bottom edge because I've marked this edge with an X. So what I'm going to do now, take a chisel, very sharp chisel, put it down on the shoulder of the tenon, and just press in lightly. Put it down, press in lightly. And then what I'm going to do is come up, and I'm going to come across the corner at about 45 degrees and just clip that off. Again, I don't need a chisel, or excuse me, a mallet or a hammer or anything like that. Just a little bit of pressure will clip those corners off. So we sever the fibers at the bottom, and then we come in from the top to clean that off. Just a little bit off each corner. Now what we're looking to do here is that when we put the mortise and the tenon together, we want the top edge of the rail and the top of the leg to be in line with one another. So we'll put that on there, slide this up, and see now I can get this all in line with one another. If the rail sticks up, I need to trim more material off of the bottom of the tenon, but this one lines up just right, and is exactly what we need for the assembly of our table. Now, I'm going to repeat this process on the other side of the rail, and I'm going to use the other leg, the one that I labeled 2, because this is labeled 2. I want to use the mortise that's labeled 2 to go ahead and line this up. So we're just going to clip these corners off real quick, make sure everything in the vise, 2 hands on the chisel at all times. Little clip, clip. And we'll fit these and see how we did here. So you can see now this doesn't quite go flush. Okay, that means I still have a little bit that I need to take off here. So you'll continue to do this, taking little itty bitty shavings off. Until that tenon and mortise fit just right. Okay, and there we go. We're pretty close there. All right, so I'll repeat this process on the lower rails. Okay, I won't have to clip the corners on the lower rails because they're already square. I just need to make sure that they fit and seat completely into the mortise. So I'll take a minute. I will clean all those up and we'll show you what that's going to look like when everything is fit. All right, you can see I fit all my mortise and tenons together. Each one is labeled so that this mortise and tenon will go together, as will this one, and that's the way that I want them oriented. Okay, I have marked the inside face of each rail, and I have marked the bottom edge of the upper short rail and the top edge of the lower short rail. That'll make sense later on when we go to cut some more joinery in here. A word to the wise, when you go to put these mortise and tenons together, don't go beating the end of the tenon with this mallet. All you're going to do is crush the end of the tenon and make it wider, okay, which will make it less likely to fit in the mortise. So take your time and make sure that each one of these fits precisely into its mate. Okay, make sure your labels are good before you move on to the next step in cutting all the grooves.